Hey everyone, this is Seth from the Loman Planetarium, and welcome to our SkyTonight program. In this episode, we're covering the dates of December 21st through December 27th. And we have some very exciting celestial events in store for us this week. I'm going to first start off by talking about the Winter Solstice on the 21st. Great way to start the celestial week. We'll then get into the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. I've talked a whole bunch about this moment and these two planets getting closer and closer together. So it's finally here. And not only will we talk about the event on the 21st, but also what they'll look like through the rest of the week and where the moon will be moving through as well. So let's get right to it. I want to start this off by saying happy winter solstice for those in the northern hemisphere and happy summer solstice for those in the southern hemisphere. But since we're in the northern hemisphere, north of the equator, we'll talk specifically about the winter solstice. And this is the time of the year when the sun sits lowest in our sky. And so if I turn on the ecliptic, this is the path that the sun seems to make through the year as we go around the sun. This is the time of year that the sun traces an arc that's lowest. And if you kind of remember way back, maybe in grade school, you learn about seasons. And seasons are not because the Earth is any closer or farther from the sun. At least they're not caused by that. They're primarily caused by Earth's tilt. We are tilted at 23.5 degrees, always tilted towards the same area in space. And as Earth goes around the sun, that tilt never changes, but the sun's angle hits us differently throughout the year. And for us in the northern hemisphere, at this time of year, around December 21st or 22nd, the sun is hitting us at a lower angle. So we're getting less energy from the sun, and that is reflected in the sky as the sun does not sit as high up as it would maybe in the summertime. In the summer, it's opposite. The sun sits highest in the sky. And to put it a little more specifically here, you'll notice that this again is the ecliptic line I have turned on, again the path of the sun here. And so this time of the year, if we turn on what's called the equator or the celestial equator, basically Earth's equator projected to the sky, this shows us that the sun sits most below it at this time of the year. Notice that here, this distance is the most extreme during the winter solstice. And this changes throughout the year. As we move away from the winter solstice, the sun will again get closer to the equator, hitting the equinox, two of them in the year, spring and fall. When the sun crosses the equator, that's when we have equal amount of day and night. And then as we pass into the summertime, once we get after the equinoxes, especially the spring equinox, then the sun gets above the celestial equator, gets higher and higher, and then it sinks again after the summer solstice comes back around, and it actually makes a figure 8 pattern. And I can show the two here on Stellarium by moving through each day very, very quickly. So let's speed up time. You notice the time and date are now at the top left, and you can watch the time move forward and keep an eye on the sun and how it moves in relation to that celestial equator. So we speed up time from the solstice here, and as we do, you'll see it move up northern, hit the equinox. That would happen in March, so the spring equinox. Then it moves above that, reaches its highest point in June when we hit the summer solstice, and then it dips back down again, crossing the equator again. That's the fall equinox or the autumnal equinox, and then we'll continue on that path back to the winter solstice again, or at least close to it, for a full year. And if you watch carefully, it made a big figure 8. That's called an analemma, that shape that you can sort of notice throughout the year. So the sun sort of bobs up and down like that, tracing a figure 8 as it moves above and below the celestial equator. So right now we're at the most bottom portion of it for this winter solstice. And the word solstice has Latin origins and basically means sun still or to stand still. And that's not because the sun is actually just frozen in the sky all of a sudden. It's because if you do watch and pay attention to the sun bobbing up and down in relation to that celestial equator, at this time of the year, as it slips lowest in the sky, it starts to round and kind of almost seem to slow or freeze in its position before it makes its way back up again. And so that was noticed a long time ago during both the winter and summer solstice, sort of the freezing of the sun's position before it sort of turns around and heads back to where it was before. And since the sun sits lowest in our sky at this time of the year, if you go out around noontime, your shadows are going to be longest, and they'll be the longest for the entire year. If you go out in the summer solstice, your shadows would be shortest because the sun is highest up. So it's kind of cool to notice that difference as you go through the seasons. Now I know that many of us are really excited to celebrate and maybe observe the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And finally, these two planets will be at their closest, at least as seen from Earth, on the 21st in the evening, just after sunset. And I've talked a whole bunch about this through the year because one of the best celestial moments of 2020 and for years to come, to see these two planets so close in the sky, it really helps you to appreciate these planets, these worlds, and the movement and the changingness of our solar system. It's kind of fun to just sort of watch it play out like clockwork and see things move back and forth and kind of next to each other. And so if we speed up time a little bit later on Monday, this evening here, we're going to see that the sun is setting, and a little bit after sunset, maybe in the 6:15 time frame, right about here. If you look just above the southwestern horizon, hopefully the weather is clear where you are and you have really no obstructions or anything in your way in the southwestern horizon, you may find this bright, maybe one, maybe two objects right there in that area, and those are the planets Jupiter and Saturn. So we can take a closer look in here. In stellarium, it looks like just one object. It doesn't really distinguish between the two objects separately very well. But if we zoom in, or if you have your own binoculars or a telescope, you'll definitely see two objects. But even with your naked eyes, it is possible. And so as we zoom in, get just a closer look, you can really see these worlds sort of come alive and sort of become the planets that we know so well. Saturn with its rings here, and Jupiter with its cloudy band. It is a gas giant, the largest in our solar system, and maybe even some of their moons. Here are the 4 Galilean moons of Jupiter, the brightest and largest moons around this planet, and maybe Saturn with its own moon Titan here as well, its largest and brightest moon that we can find near that planet. And so to see these planets so close and in this configuration is great. And as I mentioned before, the planets are within a 1/10 of a degree on the 21st. That is 6 arc minutes, or a 1/5 of the apparent width of the full moon. And so that is very, very close. And it's really, really cool to see these things line up. Again, as I've said on occasion, they're not actually close in the solar system. On this date, they're still 455 million miles away from each other. So they're still huge distances apart. But because the way things lined up this year, the way the orbits lined up, they look like they're close from our perspective. So it's really neat to see that in the sky. And we'll zoom back out to kind of take in the overall look of it. And this is something that doesn't happen that often, at least when it comes to how close they are. When Jupiter and Saturn do get close for what we call great conjunctions, this does occur every 20 years. And so that is something that's not too rare, because Jupiter's orbit is faster than Saturn's. So Saturn takes almost 30 years to go around the sun one time. Jupiter takes about 12. And so what's happening is Jupiter has to make its way around, sort of lap Saturn and catch up with it and cross its path, at least from our point of view, which takes 20 years for that to occur. But not every close approach or conjunction is the same. It just depends on the angle of all of our orbits and how things line up. And if you've been paying attention to this, maybe reading up on this or watching any news reports about this, you're hearing a couple different dates from when this last happened. And so just to clear things up, we can go back in time to show you when this last occurred. So let's head back to the year 1623, just about 13 years after Galileo first pointed his telescope looking at planets like Jupiter and Saturn. So we have wound the clock back to the middle of July of 1623, and Stellarium does a great job of showing what the sky looks like way back in the past and in the future as well. And one thing you may be hearing about is this is the last time, at least in 2020, with Jupiter and Saturn being as close as they are since the year 1623. And that is true. That was the last time these two planets were this close. But the problem with that date was that Jupiter and Saturn were only about 13 degrees from the sun, which means they were very deep in the sun's glare right around sunset. So this is showing us that date of 1623 in the middle of July of that year. And this is actually a couple other planets here. So Venus is up here. I think there's even Mercury is nearby as well. But if you look down here very close to the sun, it looks like one object, but that is Jupiter and Saturn. So we can actually zoom in. Let's target that a little bit better. Zoom in, and there you'll see not only Jupiter, but Saturn right next to it. So there was the great conjunction of 1623, but deep within the sun's glare. So no one probably saw the planets this close during this year. So they were close, but probably never seen by anybody. So if you want to go back to a time when Jupiter and Saturn were close for a great conjunction that could be seen, you have to wind the clock back all the way to March 4th in the morning of 1226. This is the Middle Ages at that point. And in the morning, just above the southeastern horizon, well enough before the sun was rising, we actually have multiple planets here. We have Venus right here, the brightest planet, and just above it and to the right here are actually two objects. Again, Jupiter and Saturn for the great conjunction for that year. So we'll zoom in, get a closer look, and there you will see the two planets really close. And I think in this year they were even closer than they are in 2020, but that was the last time they could have been seen that close to each other, and that was almost 800 years ago. So that really makes this 2020 conjunction so special. We haven't seen this in any modern times, so even with any cameras or anything, since about 800 years ago. So that's kind of a neat thing to think about. And that's the difference that you hear. So the last time Jupiter and Saturn were close, at least as close as 2020, was 1623. Probably not seen by anybody, but the last time it could have been seen because it was high enough above the sun, and being as close as they are since 2020, that would be the year 1226 that we see in this example. So you may wonder, when's the next time Jupiter and Saturn will be as close as they are now? Well, you're going to have to wind the clock forward all the way to March 15th in the morning of the year 2080. And we're there now. We're looking at it here in Stellarium. And in this morning, if you're looking in the east before sunrise and high enough above the sun, so this should be visible, there is Jupiter and Saturn. And also the waning crescent moon will be in view as well. So if we zoom in just to check and make sure, we'll see Jupiter and Saturn close to each other again. So it is kind of neat to see when these events have occurred in the past and when they'll occur in the future. And again, these great conjunctions happen every 20 years, but they're not all the same. So when things line up just right and our orbits are kind of in the right place at the right time, then that's when you get really close angular separations during the great conjunction. So that makes the 2020 conjunction even better, but we can look forward to others as well in the future. Heading back to the present here in December of 2020, what we can expect after Jupiter and Saturn are at their closest on the 21st is that they'll slowly start moving apart and drifting closer to the sun's glare. So if we zoom in a little bit just to get a better view of this, we will see them as we move through the week, how they will start moving away from each other. And you'll notice that Jupiter will actually remain a bit above and to the left here, and Saturn just below it. And we're moving through the middle of the week here, getting into Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday. They have moved quite a bit farther away than they were at the beginning of the week, and a little bit more into the glare of sunset, which means you don't have as much time to see them, but enough time to still enjoy this pair and to remember this great conjunction as we move through the rest of the holidays and into the new year. So this is a great event that we all could celebrate and watch not just on the 21st, but for many days around it. As we move through the holidays, not only can we celebrate the Great Conjunction and the Winter Solstice, but also the moon as it passes by some nice celestial objects as it waxes towards the east. And on the 21st, during all of those celestial events that are going on, the moon will be at a first quarter phase, or half full. And as we continue through the week, you'll see it enter into a gibbous phase. And then by Wednesday the 23rd, you'll notice the moon will be fairly close to this reddish looking star that doesn't twinkle, which is the planet Mars. Mars was really nice in October when it was very close to us, and now has dimmed a bit, but still looks really nice, especially next to the moon on Wednesday. And as we continue through the rest of the week here, we'll see the moon get more to the east and enter into some bright wintertime stars. This is Thursday and then Friday, and then definitely by Saturday and Sunday is when you'll really see the moon immersed in our winter sky. And so on Saturday, you'll find the moon just below and to the right of the Pleiades star cluster that we find here. And then below the moon, you'll find another cluster of stars that resembles a V shape or a small triangle. And that is the head of Taurus the Bull, which we can turn on that constellation. This is a great winter constellation here. Put on this picture. And then by Sunday the 27th, the moon will be kind of in the forehead and a little closer to that V shape of stars there. And of course, as we look around this area, we can see other great stars and constellations. Orion the Hunter, more to the east. Right over here, we have Capella, this really bright star I mentioned a couple episodes ago, which is part of Auriga the Charioteer. And above this, we can see a leftover fall constellation of Perseus, this mighty warrior. And so there's a lot of great stars and constellations, and the moon kind of moving through the sky through the holidays is quite nice. So I hope everyone gets a chance to really celebrate the sky, all of these great celestial events, and just get out there with your family and friends and really enjoy the universe that you can see above you. That's it for this exciting edition of our Sky Tonight. Thanks for joining us, and as I always like to mention, please stop on by the Lohman Planetarium if you want to see a show safely and around the holidays. We're doing a whole bunch of shows that you may enjoy, and I hope you get a chance to see all these great celestial events. So what I'll say is happy stargazing, happy winter solstice, happy great conjunction viewing, and happy holidays. Take care, everyone.